everyone. Welcome back to the Leadership Mindset. I'm Ed Kumar with Ultra Team Development. Leadership Mindset is the podcast and YouTube channel that I've got hosting leaders in and around our community and the world at large. Today we've got Stuart Windsor. Stuart's got a company called Windsor Wolves Creations, focuses on contracting and coaching contractors as the two aspects there. And Stuart, super stoked to have you on. Why don't you give yourself a little bit of an introduction so that you can carry that burden?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me here, Edwyn. About the businesses. Well, we do on the contracting side, residential renovations, commercial tenant improvements, and then on the coaching side, we really focus on developing the fundamentals of helping trades businesses get to the point where they can actually start making choices for themselves. As I learned from my own experience, the trials and tribulations of running a contracting business can be very difficult. But yet there's just a couple of I don't want to say simple, but some fundamental things that they just need to learn, and it just really makes a very powerful impact on their business and on their life.
So when you're saying trades, we're talking about things like electricians, plumbing, HVAC, like that whole world of stuff, flooring, carpenters. Okay. And so what's your background in that? Where's that expertise come from on your end with trades?
So I'm a carpenter by trade. So I started that in 2006. So a few moons ago. Got my ticket, went through it, and went through all different sorts of construction as it was. Renovations were always kind of my jam, as it required a lot of forethought and creativity and planning and execution and whatever. So it wasn't kind of just like a cookie cutter, like next. And so then from there, I got poached into being a project manager for a passive house builder. And from that point, after my employment with them, I had always wanted to have my own business for the longest time, and I finally made the kind of bold jump to do it. And
so the entrepreneurial leap.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and throughout my apprenticeship, I was always doing small side jobs here and there for friends, family, that kind of stuff. But I didn't really. As a lot of people within my industry, they think that they can do a much better job than their bosses did or the owners of their companies. And I had that same egotistical attitude. And then I got to fall on my face. And I was like, okay, it was a good ego check. But then to be able to get up and keep on moving forward with it, I wouldn't go back.
Yeah, nice. So then, okay, so you had ambition. You called it egotistical check, but I think that harnessing the ego in that way is a good thing, right? And then, also being able to fall into those mistakes and go, oh, hang on a second, like reality check. There's a balance point that I often talk about with clients, and that is that confidence and skill, where you want to have your confidence level just below your skill set.
Yeah.
And ambition just above the skill set. So it's like those three things all kind of work together. It's when skill set gets swamped by confidence that things can kind of go sideways.
And depending on the trade, especially, things can definitely go sideways. But it was necessary. Necessary to have this, and it really solidified what I've been really enjoying within the world of business is just a direct attunement to myself. And you're kind of forced to do it, and because you're the
direct
one...
attunement.
Sorry?
Just hang out there for a sec. What do you mean by direct attunement?
When I'm previous to having my own business, I was able to kind of be to be checked out. Especially I've been in the industry for over a decade. I'm like, I know how to do all these things, so I can turn my brain off. I'm kind of not there, whatever. Once I started my business, it was like, okay, if I check out, I don't make money. Then I don't pay my bills. And I can't pay my rent. I can't pay my food. I can't do all these things. And so I had to be on all the time, but kind of really understand where I was going, what I wanted to do with it, and what is the purpose of this, especially when you consider how much time, how much effort you got to put in to be able to run a business, especially in the infant stages.
Yeah.
Like it's so much easier to just go and work a job. I needed to find that attunement and that alignment with myself to be like, hey, I'm doing this for a reason. Let's stay focused on that. So whether it's the good times, the bad times, I can still find the motivation to move through.
Okay, so then that direct experience that you had is you were kind of growing that part of your business. Because you have this coaching side to trades, and it's very specific. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the size of the team and like what you're actually sort of pinpointing? It's a pretty cool, very focused aspect. So just kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So when it comes to the businesses themselves, they're all fairly small. I'm going for 4 employees or less, generally between kind of like 150 to 1,000 to $1 million in revenue. People that are in a spot where they're kind of just chugging along and they don't really know what's going on. There's a lot of taking from Peter to pay Paul, that kind of stuff. And I focus on three main points when it comes to the specifics of what I'm coaching, which is going to be the financial management, time management, and acquiring their target audience. But everything is wrapped within the envelope of pushing through my three core values, which is respect, accountability, and honesty. What I've turned down potential clients, and I've also had to have some kind of frank conversations with existing clients for both businesses, to be honest, within these things. But what I found, going back to the attunement to self, as I continue to surround myself with people that share those values with me, it tends to improve my overall kind of way of life and makes things a lot more fluid within what's going on. And yeah, so I approach every interaction that I have with a client, whether it's a coaching client, contracting client, subcontractors, with those three core values in mind.
Okay, so you mentioned respect, honesty, and accountability. So you're playing a bit of like an advisor's role as well as an accountability role in I guess what are effectively people that were in your stage a little while ago, where they were like ambitious, maybe egotistical, and uncertain about their self-awareness of skill set, right?
Yep.
And so tell me a little bit around, let's start with honesty and accountability first, and then we'll dive into the respect part, because the respect part, I think, kind of leads into a few other parts of the conversation. So tell me about honesty and accountability first. Like what do those mean to you?
Yeah. So I'll start with honesty, and then we'll go into accountability afterwards, because I feel that you need to be honest to be able to be accountable. So honesty is during those times where there's opportunities to blur the line or to be in the gray, that you step into your courage to be able to communicate effectively what's actually going on. And I found
struggles and wins. So being truthful about, hey, this is not working. I'm suffering here, or I'm having this challenge here, or whatever happens to be.
Truly, and exactly what you pointed out there, the struggles and the wins. It's just as valuable to celebrate the wins as it is to be open and communicative about the losses. From myself, say as the general contractor, when a subtrade comes up with an incredible solution to an issue that was arising, to be able to communicate that effectively to the clients and be like, hey, this trade came up with this solution, like this has been fantastic. I didn't think of this. This is great. And to be able to make sure that is communicated effectively. I want to go back to the ego-driven side of things. I know a lot of contractors, and I've worked for a lot of contractors that will take any opportunity to bring positive attention to themselves and shoo the rest of it off. Whereas, you kind of take the good with the bad, and it just affords much better relationships between yourself and your clients, as well as the subtrades or anyone kind of involved within it.
Well, and it builds that trust, right? I mean, the second you have that sort of like whiff of like, is this person kind of pulling the wool over my eyes a little bit, or are they being self-delusional? Is another factor, right? Where it can really kind of make you kind of question whether this is the person that you really want to work with, and then how long is this project going to go, and all these sorts of things. So especially in an industry, I think that depending on the specific trade, can have some integrity and honesty issues. catching them at this stage where they're starting their business, getting that entrepreneurial spirit and getting a solid client base while instilling that honesty aspect in there is huge. So then how does that tie into accountability? You kind of mentioned a little bit about it already, but let's just sort of drill down into that.
So the accountability side of things, say on the coaching side, we have all sorts of conversations with about all sorts of different things coming through. And it's going to come up with, what are kind of challenges that you're facing. And then to get there, say my clients in this example, to speak of those situations, if they're speaking of the external and what happened to them externally and the effects, whatever, outside of that, I kind of let them talk it out and discuss it. But it's really important to be able to bring that around of, okay, what was my place in this? And that's the accountability piece, right? So, okay, where did I go wrong with this? Where did I mess my communication up on this? How could I have done something better to improve this? Or now that this has actually happened, what can I do to repair maybe what was damaged in something that happened previously? So
it sounds like you're kind of talking about ownership.
Yeah.
Right. Like, okay, well, yes, you're the owner of your business, but you're not taking ownership.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. One is an outlook and a deep philosophy, and the other one is a title on a business plan. Like, oh, you're the owner, and then there's a difference between being the owner and taking ownership, and that's a huge factor for sure. This is like the locus of control in psychology and that factor as well, right?
And truly within it, I mean, the only way they're going to be able to break through certain barriers that are created is to actually become honest about it. And that honesty could be just with themselves, let alone with others. And then to have that accountability of, here's what's going on. I messed this up because I did X, Y, and Z, and I need to do A, B, and C to be able to resolve it.
So when you're having these coaching, you've got a portfolio of clients that you work with, and when you are having these conversations, these are like regular check-ins, weekly setup meetings, maybe like on the fly. Hey, this is going on, real time type stuff. Like how does that work? Like, what's the structure?
Yeah, the structure on the coaching side of things is weekly meetings, but then additionally to that, I try to be available as much as possible for little check-ins or phone calls, just to be that person. Being a new business owner, it can be very isolating, especially if you've been an employee for a long time. I'm sure a lot of your friends are employees. You start your own business, you're in a whole new world. And so when you're looking for support and you're like, I don't know what's going on here, to just be able to have that quick little check-in is going to be able to go a long way. And additionally, I've also stepped in with my clients, plus some of their professionals associated with their business, their bookkeepers, accountants, that kind of stuff, just to make sure that we're proactively staying on the same page and just letting everyone know that's involved within that person's business, what's happening, where we're going, and what the trajectory is.
Cool. So, all right. So you've got them being truthful with what's going on. You're now holding them accountable towards fulfilling the promises that they've made to themselves, having core ownership, not just ownership. And then, the very first one you talked about was respect. And, respect is kind of a word that people demand, right? Like, I mean, I've worked with some people where they're like, I don't think my team's giving me the respect that I deserve. So
yeah.
I'm always like, okay, well, respect is gifted. It's not taken, right? For sure. But then also there's that self-respect in there. So like where does respect fall in these three pillars that you're talking about between respect, honesty, and accountability?
Well, I mean, exactly what you said there. You cannot demand respect.
Mm-hmm.
You can demand fear. You can demand certain levels of control, but not respect. Respect, akin to love, is something that needs to be given freely and received accordingly. And I'm glad you also brought up the self-respect side as well, because there's two components to this. And for me personally, I always found general respect so easy. It was always really deeply ingrained in me. And it was like from being a small child, my father was always, always, always about respect and just got it in. And so for me personally speaking, background, any kind of demographics don't really make any kind of difference for me when it comes to how I'm going to treat you as an individual. A lot of it, and we've kind of talked about this briefly before, is going to come from psychographics, kind of who you are as a person. How are you going to represent yourself? How are you going to carry yourself? And if people aren't values-driven individuals, then I tend to stay away from them. And that's their choice to live the life that they want to live, but it's not something that I wish to have revolving around me. And then to pull it on the flip side, on the self-respect, that is kind of akin to understanding what I'm willing to accept and how I want to live and abide by my life. And that's where I had mentioned previously before as well, with just understanding my sense of self. And really diving into that. I've made a point of going through and doing a lot of self-work, and I'm continuing down that path is really important to me. And so that self-respect has come in the form of speaking up, speaking out, or even to just retreat and to be able to protect myself as I need.
So then, okay, now something that I talk about a lot is this idea that one of the very, very important parts towards, establishing a leadership mindset, towards establishing being an effective leader, and being able to positively impact the people that you're working with, is starting with yourself first, right? That self-awareness piece. And sometimes that's hard because you start tapping into stuff that, is, self-challenging. You start to have these biases that you kind of have to either lean into and go, okay, that exists for a reason, or where did that come from? Like, there's a lot that delves into that self-awareness piece. So, something that you and I had a discussion with not too long ago was this idea of vulnerability in leadership. And it's something that's kind of coming to the fore and more in sort of regular media now. But how does that play in towards this idea of being a positive leader, figuring out who you are, but then also being vulnerable about that process? That's a big question. Okay, so I'll go. Yeah,
it's a big question.
Okay.
I like it. For me, leadership is being the one who steps into the unknown first.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that comes from like an incredible amount of courage to be able to actually take that step and move forward. And it's always been just so important. Again, for me, I can only speak of my own experience and my own understanding. For me to lead by example, and for others who want to truly be and feel that they are leaders, for them to lead by example first. And that's not perfect action. That doesn't mean you come through and everything is, rose tinted and great success all through and through. It's being able to step in, taking that courage, probably falling on your face, and being able to go with it. And so that's the beautiful thing about the coaching with the businesses with where they're at, because each of them have taken at least one step into that unknown. Mm-hmm. And so there's at least some semblance of leadership within them. And then it's just a matter of making sure that that's attuned in the right kind of direction.
So let's bring this back to you as well. So at what moment did you realize that you had to kind of deep dive into what was going on with you, and also what level of vulnerability? This is something that is very common. We're breaking that whole mold of wearing this mask or putting on the jacket, I call it. Oftentimes when leaders get promoted or take on a leadership role or become a business owner, they have to put on this jacket. Like suddenly, like they were super effective as a peer leader, and then they get some sort of authority, and then the lab coat comes on, and then they're not the same person. And how do we strip that away so that you can be authentic, so you can be effective and learn the skills, but still expose that level of truth, coming back to honesty and vulnerability together? Like how does that happen?
It actually originated for me a while ago. started. The seeds were planted a while ago within my own experience. And that was because I coached high performance hockey for a while.
Okay.
And that was a perfect kind of breeding ground for understanding a lot of the fundamentals of this leadership. And I started off at the beginning with kind of like before putting the jacket on, kind of chummy with a lot of the guys. And it was effective in the sense of being that kind of peer-to-peer leader. I was a young coach and whatever within it. Then I put on the jacket, and then I had this kind of learning moment of like, okay, me just saying, do this, do this, do this isn't actually effective. And then kind of had to find that next evolution, which was a kind of healthy balance in between the two. But then also going back to what I was talking about before, being open, being honest, being accountable, and even just being vulnerable about my situation. And on the hockey side of things, it could be just being vulnerable about my skills, or more significantly, as was kind of more important for me on the coaching side of things, was to lead by example for these young men. They were grade 10 to 12, so 15 to 17-year-old, to lead by example how to be accountable, how to be respectful, how to be open and honest and do these things, and then making a point of bringing more and more like outside influences to develop these things within them. And as that kind of fed and fostered within me, it threw me on this trajectory and going down the path of self-development, like finding a mentor, and going down that path. And then he's always on me about making sure I step into it. And while it is hard and it's scary, and I've gone through an absolute roller coaster, I wouldn't have it any other way. As again, with that self-attunement coming into play again, I just go deeper and deeper in that, because I'm just listening to what's going on within and taking those steps. And I mess up on a regular basis, and I'll be the first to admit that one, absolutely. But it's, again, just part of my path, part of my journey.
You know, you know, an aspect that I do a lot with my coaching and development is emotional intelligence training. And there's often this thing where there's an assumption that because there's an academic understanding around it, that there's a perfection on behavior on the other side. And it's not true, right? It's a consistent progress. And I'm glad you brought up the hockey coaching, because the thing about coaching a team, an actual sports team or a sports individual, like I did I've taught kickboxing for a long time. You know, it's just after work, great, I'm going to go teach kickboxing, and Simon's actually going to be a guest on one of our sessions as well. And it really gets you in tune with, like, am I effective in being able to help people grow? Right? I mean, the second someone steps on the ice, they're not going to be that great potentially. Or relative to who else is stepping on the ice, they're not going to be that great at a specific skill. Like maybe it's skating backwards, maybe it's lateral. I'm not that great at hockey, so I'm just going to throw stuff out there. And, you know, like maybe it's stick handling, or maybe it's a level of aggression or control or whatever happens to be. But you start to be able to drill down into what specific aspects of their skill are they good at, which ones are getting better, and how do you highlight those things. Like, so I found that sports, teaching and coaching sports, has a direct parallel and impact towards becoming a better leader, manager, owner, across the board. So if there's an opportunity to do it, I would highly recommend to everyone listening and watching, like, find some way to start to get involved, and you'll realize how challenging that can be, but then also how rewarding. I used to be very results oriented when it came to management, and then when I started teaching kickboxing, my management style shifted because I started shifting towards process and growth, and it was a huge change. Did you find a similar arc?
Absolutely. And additionally, I just want to kind of make a point within this as well, and especially given a recent conversation from a training and development and hiring and growth standpoint when it comes to businesses. You brought up a good point of, like, you're going to learn, and like there's so many layers behind it. If you're looking for leaders to be able to step into your business that either are there and are developing, or you're looking to hire new, look for people who have that background in coaching sports. That there's, because of exactly what we're talking about here, there's so much value behind it. Mm-hmm. But to pull it back in a bit of a similar but different kind of direction. I have seen, and I want to talk about the skill side of things versus the emotional side of things. I have coached a whole slew of different players, some very high skilled, some not so skilled, great attitudes, bad attitudes, good work ethic, all that kind of stuff. But I've seen some of the most skilled players who have no ability to regulate their emotions or no ability to understand what's going on. And they are immensely ineffective because as soon as anything happens that is outside of their control, they lose it and then they shut down, or they'll do something stupid or whatever. So all the more importance and significant of being able to understand and appreciate the development of both. So one player in particular that I'm thinking of right now, for that season, we actually made a point of going in and learning group meditation. So took the team to a local spot where you can learn meditation, went through it. And so with this individual, as they kind of sunk into it, when they found that regularity, all of a sudden they exploded. They became incredibly effective. But then when they weren't in that attunement or alignment, they went right back to their old patterns and would kind of shut it down. But so it was just to put in those seeds, water them a little bit, and see where it goes, was immensely effective.
And I mean that word attunement's coming back. That idea of attunement and alignment. You know, this whole idea of integrating your experiences, figuring out what's working for you, what's not working for you, and then being able to make those adjustments. Not perfection, but at least being able to make those adjustments. And I think that this is an area where, especially, you know, with leadership, I think that, you know, I worked with a business team where majority of the people on that business team were all women, right? And the guys had to connect emotionally with what was going on. And now what's happening is that even in business teams that are, say, predominantly men, that they have to do the same thing again, because this old school mentality of being I'm a guy and I'm a leader and I'm gonna have this kind of like armor on is just not effective. Because in order to be a leader, you have to have people to lead, and those who are underneath that leadership style are just not following. They're not. They're like, this is dumb. I don't agree with that. And, you know, I think this has a large part to play, not the only part to play, with the fact that there is struggles within industries right now in trying to find staff. Is, you know, COVID allowed everyone to reevaluate. And I like to bring up this term reevaluate because reevaluate has the term value in it.
Yeah.
They're reevaluating. They're coming back into attunement with what their core values are. And one of those core values is not to be yelled at going into work, is not to have this deregulated leader, is not to have someone who may be super effective in hard skill side and yet come down on their team like they don't matter and, you know, like Thor's hammer, right? And so I think it's amazing that you're catching these guys at an early stage of being like instilling these core values of respect, honesty, and accountability. Like those are really, really important things. And I think that you know, you're dealing with small businesses. When those guys scale out, those aren't going to go away. So the positive impact, the ripple effect of this is just, it's awesome, right?
That's the intention. It's funny how I picked two of probably the most toxic industries, but you know, but I started my business in the first place so I could pick and choose who I kept around me, to be able to decide if I felt that someone was toxic and inappropriate and kind of bringing either myself or the general around me down, then I now have the authority to be able to politely ask them to take their business elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then the coaching side of things, as I'm doing and living and leading that, but then on the coaching side of things, it allows me to do the exact same things what I was doing with the hockey stuff, with planting those seeds, watering those seeds, letting them sprout and grow, and then exactly that, It's not going to go away.
Yep.
And as people realize and actualize the power of being vulnerable, like especially for a good chunk of men, the idea of vulnerability is terrifying.
Yeah.
Right. But so as you're able to step into it, and you're kind of offering up a certain level of powerlessness, it's actually very empowering. This is something, personally speaking, that I am working on in this moment, in this current iteration of where I'm at right now, is this entire thing of stepping into powerlessness and really recognizing how powerful it makes you as you step into it.
Okay. So let's hang out there for a second then, Stuart.
Yeah.
So this idea of becoming aware of your own vulnerabilities, I think that there's a fear that by doing so, there's a risk of minimizing self-esteem. Like I've heard this, for example, where I was working with this one client, and I said to them, I said, listen, this is what your boss thinks of you, right? So why don't you just lead with that and say, hey, listen, I understand that this is your perception of what's going on, and then don't defend it. Like just go, I understand this is your position of what's going on. Like with me, that you think I'm, being a bit hostile and that I'm coming in and I'm always throwing out, cheeky remarks and kind of disrupting the team. And they couldn't do it. Like they could not do it. They couldn't even role play it in the moment. It was like, yeah, but like then aren't I admitting that they're right? I'm like, this has nothing to do with being right. This has to do with the fact that you're touching into something that is you're pushing back against. So let's just step into this a little bit. So how like what are your experiences for either yourself or someone that you've worked with? I mean, we're both here, so I mean, for yourself maybe would be great to talk about, where you've had that moment where you touched on something that you unpacked, right? Cracked the egg, so to speak, and you were better off for it, but it was really hard. Like it was a difficult, challenging moment.
I won't go into the most significant one, as it doesn't seem the forum for it, but I'll give a very specific one, without details, of course, of an experience that I had last summer on the contracting side of things. And you brought up a point that I really want to make sure is reiterated here. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about just being able to get it out there and then sit in it, and then you can determine the path from there. And so I had an issue with a subcontractor where work wasn't completed. We had tracked their time, and I was trying to proactively come up with a resolution to a problem that came up. Seemed that it wasn't going to be happening, and I was just choked about this. And because I'm wanting to build relationships, I want to build long-term plans. And one of my mistakes within this was not realizing that this business was driven by someone who's a transaction-based individual as opposed to a relation-based individual. And so for me, it was just like it was like water and oil. Yeah. There was just no gelling, no connection, whatever within it. And I just had to kind of sit in it, sit in my frustrations, and what was going on, and just stew in it, mind the name. But so that allowed me to really sink into it and allowed me to reflect on my own experience within it, how I need to change, it just really double down on what's important to me and the significance of relational style individuals.
Okay, so let's shift gears here a little bit. Okay, so you're married with a dog.
Yes.
Nice. And so how is your work with obviously being a husband now and working with individuals? How are the two things kind of interrelating? So how is your relationship development and the focus you're spending on relationships in a business setting in positively impacting your personal relationship and vice versa? Because I find that they do have wins that come up almost in a ratchet style format, right?
Absolutely. So I'm sure my wife gets frustrated with me all the time because I am I'm wanting to talk about things. I want to get them out there, and it's just um, I'm learning the grace and significance behind it. As a coach, it's a little bit different. I can call people out in an eloquent kind of way, but when we're in the midst of something that is like an emotional connectivity between the two of us, then it's trying to find that healthy ground is a lot more difficult, but that much more important. And
Because of your own emotional investment.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. And so as we are able to grow and tackle and have open and honest and direct conversations, we are able to see and hear one another and respect one another to higher and higher levels. I find that on the flip side, on the business side, either one, my bar just continues to get set higher and higher and higher with every single, like, as my relationship develops, my expectation of business relationships increase with it. That the level of connectivity, the level of trust, the level of honesty that I'm expecting from those around me continues to increase because it's much more important to have, for me, greater depths of connection and that interconnectivity rather than having like a large expansive network of people who don't really know anything about you. So I think there's a definite connection between the two. And while I know I'm a lot to handle sometimes, uh, or a lot of the time, but it's been really meaningful for myself. I can't speak for my wife, but at least for myself, it's been incredibly profound. And similar to what I said before, and I'm going to keep reiterating it, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, like, seeing that growth in your own ability to connect in your personal relationships, in your work relationships, and sometimes they can fight each other at the same time. Like, for example, let's say that there's a negotiation tactic that was working really well, and it works in a business setting. It may not work at negotiating, at home, right? And meanwhile, there's a layer of familiarity that you can have at home that maybe, like, it kind of spills over into that boundary of like, oh, did I do that in that business setting? And finding that, I think, is important for leaders to go, you don't have to get it right. You just have to course correct and or reinforce it if it went well. But take the risk, like what you said in the very beginning, that a leadership to you is being able to step into the unknown first.
Yeah.
That takes a lot, right? And how do you get to that place where that can safely happen? And here's the thing: it might not be safe to make that happen. You may have to break into new ground, especially in the industry that you're working with. I've got some clients who are in that same sort of field in construction and installation and things like that. And it's not that business. I'll give you a quick story. There was a kid that I was interviewing on behalf of a business, and I was like, oh, okay, great. And he was he top of his class in elevator mechanics. Got into the trade circle right away, like literally won the Willy Wonka's ticket, right? Because it's really hard to get into that circle right out of the gate. Got hazed hard for like the first 6 to 8 months and left. Like, here's this kid, just graduated BCIT, right? Is making over 6 figures in his first year and is leaving to go back to do business education because he's like, I don't want to be in that industry. And how do we prevent that from happening? I was like, man, like, you seem to have a lot of talent here. You top of your class, got into it right away. Clearly you have the skill set and you have the actual temperament of where businesses are going. But there's the old guard. And so how do you manage that? Like how do your teams, how do you, working in this environment, bringing forth a more vulnerable leadership style, a more respectful leadership style? how do you kind of break ground in each of these scenarios? And how do you deal with that pushback?
Yeah, well, immediately it's just pushing down the understanding of abundance, and especially within this industry, within Vancouver in particular. So it definitely distorts my reality within what's going on here. But um, complementary to that, you don't need to work with those people. You don't need to support that. And whether it's going to be as an entrepreneur, say working for, a member of the old guard who's a contractor, like forget his number. Like, hey, you know what? Like you can decide. So there's multiple different tactics you can go down. One can be standing up and speaking out. And that was something that I did throughout a lot of my youth. And what I realized is I wasn't able to change the old guard and to try to get them to see things differently or whatever. And especially like if I'm triggered and my ego's going off and like you can't talk to people that kind of way or whatever, then nothing can come from it. And so to be able to empower yourself to be in a position to pick and choose who you keep around you. Obviously, I'm speaking for myself within this as well. But then also being able to influence those around you. So the easiest step one would be to identify and recognize who they are. And if there is the opportunity to be able to separate yourself from them, I feel that that's a very effective way to go about it. But part two, more significantly, to speak up and speak out, to step into that uncomfortability, to step into that vulnerability, and to be able to let it go. And that's the terrifying part. That's the scary part. That's the stuff that takes courage. And so there's
grow it over here, and inevitably it will start to push into a larger percentage of that industry, of that trade, of those people that you're working with are going to start to have that ripple effect, like what we kind of talked about earlier. Exactly. But don't necessarily go wade into the turf of the enemy and say, here we are.
I mean, it's just a matter of picking your battles.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if it doesn't seem viable that someone's going to be able to even like they don't have to change entirely, but to just be able to see you with where you're at. Because if they can't see themselves, there's no way they're going to be able to see you where you're at. And so for some people, it's just not worth it. In which case, if it comes down to it, and all these, the old guard is just all they're hanging out, they have their own group, they're doing their own thing, and then those of us that want to be values driven, those of us that are open and flexible within the world of our own emotional understanding and bring that into the industry and understanding the appropriateness to really want to reframe what people perceive a lot of construction individuals as, and to recognize that a lot of construction workers of all sorts of different trades, they are artists. But they're in a dirty, gross, a very grimy style of industry to be able to do it. But the kind of craftsmanship that it can be electricians laying out all their lines. It could be a mill worker into the most intricate detail into some sort of custom fabricated piece. Or even just little thing where it's so powerful. I feel that there is a strong contingency of people within this industry who are that, like I said, that artist, that emotional, that creative side, but are in surrounded, hopefully not as much as what it kind of feels like, but surrounded kind of by sharks that are just sniffing out, looking for that kind of vulnerability. Probably because they're afraid of their own inability to be vulnerable, but that's just a shot in the dark.
Yeah, but this is where it's going, right? Because there is this drop in across the board, like what's going on with that Great Resignation, and the whole idea that people are not going back into these industries. I know healthcare is experiencing this as well, where there's a lot of burnout and a disconnect with resilience, and because of the pressures that people have been under, and because the leadership is not there to sort of like draw out these strengths and the values of why they're in there in the first place. And the more that communication and that discussion starts to happen, it's so important. I was working with this business team, and everyone was like, "Oh, you know what? You got to watch out for this guy," right? Like before I went in, right? The owners, other team members, like everyone was like, "Oh man, you got to watch out for this guy," right? Let's call him Jack. Okay, so man, you got to watch out for Jack. And I was like, okay, and not one person didn't mention Jack. And all I said was, let's move the rest of the team in such a powerful forward momentum that Jack will be left standing on his own. Let's not focus on Jack at all. We'll know. And Jack will either run to keep up or he'll be gone. It won't be that hard for us to discern whether this will happen or not. And lo and behold, it lasted for a little while, a couple of years at least, where Jack kind of pulled forward a little bit. Some old bad habits and internal challenge points where he didn't do the deep work, didn't come forward. But it's important to focus on what that goal is, right? And I think that's something that you're doing really well, where you're setting this vision, because you're dealing with specialists, right? You're dealing with specialists who are going, hey, I love this and I want to start my own business. They get on 3 or 4 people. And then they're like, what? How do I do this? And what do I do here? And da-da-da-da-da, and on and on and on. And that's the time. Like, that's the time where you're catching them. And I think that's really, really cool.
Well, and the vast majority of trades business owners are guys who are people from the trades that either enjoyed it or were really good at it or something along those lines. And then they're like, I made the point earlier, if this guy can do it, I can do it for sure. And then you realize that there's a whole new set of skills you need to learn when starting a business.
Yep.
And so you could be the best electrician in the world, but if you don't know how to run a business, you're going to be kind of very limited in capacity, to say the very least.
Yeah. And then you're going to run into those issues, and you're going to fall into whatever habits worked for you back then, except those habits don't necessarily work once you become a leader. The moment you get into that leadership position where you're talking directly with suppliers, building those relationships, talking directly with the customers, trying to hire and trying to develop quality in the team, but making them feel like in a growth. Those are all very nuanced parts of being a business owner that, who do you call? Do you literally just call your buddy and say, hey man, this is what I'm going through? And they're like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going through. And then person C, oh yeah, that's what I'm going through. And then no one has a solution. And yeah, here's Stuart hanging out in the background going, just sitting there sipping his coffee, going, yeah,
no.
guys.
no. That's not how I do it. I'm the one that's stepping through and doing it and being like, hey, this is the way that it's working for me. This is the way I'm going.
Yeah.
If you want to come with, then I will show you how I do it.
Yeah.
It's not the way to do it.
But I mean that you're there. You're available going, man, I've been there, right? Here they are, running through the mud on a rainy field. and and you're like, yep,
there's a path just to the side. You don't need to run through the mud. There's a path right there.
Exactly. and yeah, and so you're able to introduce that to them and have those relationships. That's really awesome. Hey, so we're kind of coming to the end here, and I want to be respectful of your style as well. We were talking about the before we got into recording. I want to touch on one thing that I had as a note here, and that was that we were talking about this counterbalance of vulnerability and not defensive armor, but stoicism and sort of being unflappable. And so when does it make sense to have that composure, and when does it make sense? How do you switch between the two?
So I think it's really important to lead with vulnerability as you can, but as you lead with vulnerability, you become crystal clear very quickly of who is and isn't willing to accept it. And so for those that are willing to accept it and want to be a part of it, then continue that path of vulnerability with them. And then what I have found from my own experience has been that sense of grounding. And my perception of stoicism has changed over the past few years as well. Before, it was like stoicism is I am emotionally totally detached from whatever this situation is or whatever. And like, I don't actually experiencing it. Like, I don't have these feelings, as opposed to a sense of when you're set in a place of a grounded nature where something can be happening and you could be on fire on the inside, but your ability to stay grounded within it and be like, nope, this is me. This is my wound, my trauma, this is my monkey. And I can hold on to this as it's necessary. But so for those that maybe don't want to go down that path, that don't want to be vulnerable, that don't want to see you or hear you, then that's fine. And it becomes crystal clear. And that's why I feel that the leading with vulnerability is the best way to go about it, because it doesn't leave it up for guessing. It doesn't leave it up for judgment. It's just, here it is. Are you okay with this? Yes, great. Fantastic. Then we can continue down this path. No, that's fantastic. Then I'm going to keep you at a certain distance. And that's where that lies. That's how
cool. That was really well said. Stuart, I'm so happy you're a part of my life. Like, seriously, like, it's like, the whole thing of like, you open it up and then people come into the world. And I really feel very genuinely appreciative of who you are and the positive impact you're having. And I think our conversations are always super fun. Talking about being seen and heard, how does someone get in touch with Stuart Windsor?
So I'm doing my best to stay away from social media, but phone and email are generally the best way to go about it. So phone 778-956-7490. Email Stuart@windsorwolves.com. I believe you can connect those details into descriptions, links.
Yeah, I'll put them in the bottom description.
But those are traditionally the best way to go about it. And yeah, because the social side of things, anyone who goes and takes a look at my Instagram or whatever else, like there's tumbleweeds. There's digital tumbleweeds, and that's for a reason. But nonetheless, I am always time permitting, open and available to have conversations with individuals, and whether that's just going to be connecting and networking, or if there's opportunity for us to be a good fit on either the contracting or the coaching side of things.
That's amazing. Stuart, a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for coming on the Leadership Mindset. Thanks for being someone who's come into my social circle and is inspiring me at the same time. So I'm big thumbs up and high fives and hugs when we meet up for another coffee and snacks.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
cool,
you
guys.
really
You're very welcome. Thanks everyone again for joining us for Leadership Mindset. We had Stuart Windsor on, and I'll link all his details in on the bottom. Really looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Share this with your friends. Please like, please subscribe, because if you're awesome, other awesome people will see it if you do so. All right, take care.